Hello everyone, my name is Dragos. Today I will finally be bringing you my review and history video of this beautiful, original and unrestored piece of Russian space flight and watch history in general. It's perhaps one of the most important chronographs ever made in my opinion. And it's of course the Poljot caliber 3017. I will begin this video by saying that everyone knows the Omega Speedmaster. It's a wonderful watch. I don't want to get in a debate whether this or the Speedmaster saw space first. It's your decision whether you think this one did it or the Speedy, but trust me, they're very, very close in terms of timing. I mean, whether this was first in space or the Omega was first in space is just a matter of, I don't know, maybe a couple of days, a couple of weeks, months maximum. After I'll be bringing you and telling you the history of this model, trust me, you won't think that this is a copy of the Omega by any means. And it's of course not. It's its very own thing. It has its very own pedigree and a very special and very interesting history. So the history of this model first began in the 1950s, in the mid-50s, when the Soviet Union needed a chronograph watch for their pilots and cosmonauts. So they imported from the Swiss the drawings and the know-how for the Venus Caliber 150. The Venus Caliber 150 was a column wheel chronograph movement which began production in the early 1940s. It was used in Breitlings of the time, in Patex and other famous brands. It was a tried and tested movement. They used this and they basically kind of cloned it and made the Poljot caliber 3017. The Poljot back then, when the first movements came out, wasn't actually known Poljot. It was known, I think, as the first Moscow watch factory. I'll attach some pics here in the review. The first ever watches, which were built in 1959, were Cyrillic written Strela watches. Strela is Russian for arrow. They were built under very strict military specifications, and they were only available for Russian Air Force officers, senior military, party and government officials. The important thing to note about these watches is that they were not available for sale to the general public. You could really not get a watch, a Strela watch, if you weren't someone important in the Soviet Union, and they definitely did not export these watches. Okay, so you may be probably wondering, well, Dragos, why are you wasting my time? You told me about this Strela, important watch, you started to tell me about its history. You seem to not be holding in your hands a Strela watch, Dragos. Why are you wasting my time? Well, hear me out. Although it is not written Strela on the dial, in 1964, they stopped writing Strela in Cyrillic and started writing Poljot on the dial. This was because back then the first Moscow watch factory renamed itself in the Poljot watch factory, or simply put Poljot. So they changed the name on the dials. But trust me, this is a very early model. According to this graph, which I'll show you right now, you can see that from 1959 to 1964, I believe, they produced the Cyrillic Strela watches, and from the beginning of 1964, 65, 66, these early Polyots came out. So after knowing this, I'll continue with the history of the model. Okay, so where was this Strela watch featured? Why is it so famous? Why am I hyping it out so much? Because, let me tell you, the first man to ever walk in space, to do extravehicular activity in space, as they call it in space talk, I think, was a chap named Alexei Leonov. He was a quite important man in the history of space exploration. Why? Because he was the first man who walked in space. He went out of his space ship and he walked in space for a duration of like 12 minutes, I think. And all of this while wearing a Strela chronograph. A Strela with a caliber 3017 movement. This was first done in the 18th of March 1965 during the Voskhod 2 mission. That was its name. It's a very interesting story to this mission. Alexei Leonov, I think when he came out of the spaceship, upon attempting re-entry in the spaceship, his costume was too big, so he needed to take air out of his costume. It's a very interesting story, and I'll link a video in the description of this review, so you can check it out. I highly recommend it. Just as a side note, the Americans went in space and had their first spacewalk several months later. The guy who did this for NASA was called Ed White, and he was wearing, yep, you guessed it, an Omega Speedmaster. So I don't want to jump in conclusions whether this or the Omega went into space first for the first. Another important yet tragic character which had an important role to play in the history of this model was Vladimir Komorov. He was famous for the Soyuz 1 space mission, which actually was his last, sadly. It was in 1967. Back then, the Soviet Union and the Americans were, of course, in a race for space exploration, to conquer space, to conquer the moon. So they sent the Soyuz 1 mission in space with Vladimir Komorov on board as the main astronaut, even though they knew that his spaceship had over 200 technical defects. Yuri Gagarin at the time, which was of course a hero in the Soviet Union because of his pioneering in space cosmonautic stuff, tried to stop this mission and tried to make pressures on the Soviet government to stop this mission from happening, but sadly he couldn't. So Vladimir Komorov became one of the first tragic deaths to come from space exploration. You can see this picture here of Vladimir during an interview with him wearing a Poljot chronograph. I actually quite love this picture. It's a story of love for his job and ultimately for sacrifice. Apollo 11, which of course were the first guys to walk on the moon, you know that they left, I think it's a crate of things there on the moon commemorating their walk. And among those things, I think that they said in an interview that they left a medal for Vladimir Komorov. So other people acknowledged his importance and sacrifice. Okay, so after telling you guys these couple of small stories, maybe I managed to convince you just a little bit that the thing which I'm holding in my hands is just quite a bit special. Now, as you can see from this picture, these watches came in a lot of variants, both in white, in black dial, with the baton hands, or the hands which came with loom. Some of these variants had the telemeter, a tachymeter, but something which was common to all of these was that they all had these two subdials, one for the second counter on the left and the right one for the 45-minute counter. Now let me just start the chronograph as I continue to tell you about this watch, so you can finally see it in action. This central blued hand is of course the chronograph second hand. A very interesting action to the buttons. I like the way that they tick when you press them. Of course, the reset button brings things to the zero counter instantaneously. This is actually my first mechanical chronograph watch, and oh my god, I absolutely love it. After handling this one, I definitely want to buy other chronograph watches, because it's just something special. Okay, if you want to determine, let's just say you have one of these watches and you want to determine the date of manufacture. You can do this with this diagram, which I showed previously. You need, of course, to open the case back, because on the movement you have a code, a serial number, and using that serial number you can determine the year of manufacture. I am not going to open this, at least not again. Maybe you'll believe me that this is a very early model, but maybe you will not. The thing is, I don't want to open it because I'm not a watchmaker, and if I will try and open it, I will probably stab myself, stab the watch, stab the tripod, stab the room, maybe break the lamp which lights this watch up, probably create a black hole in the universe. I'm definitely not a watchmaker, and I don't want to ruin anything by trying to open it. I'm only opening my case backs at a watchmaker. I'm only letting an experienced watchmaker work on this. Okay, it seems that it has run out of power. Let us just use this opportunity so we can wind this mechanical chronograph. As you can see, it stopped working. I tried only winding it a little bit for this review because I wanted you guys to hear the winding action on this watch. Maybe there are some of you out there who will tell me that I'm an idiot for winding this watch while the chronograph is still running, so I'll try and reset it. And now I'm going to wind it. Listen to this winding movement. Winding tick. Seems like it needs a little bit more. It's quite difficult to do with these gloves on. Okay, now it's okay. Upon using this model, I noticed it has a power reserve of about, let's just say 25-30 hours. I mean, a full wind will definitely keep it running for a day, but I'll get to that at another point of the review. Okay, so as we have determined, this is an early Poljot model. As you can see, the dial contains batons instead of numerals. It only has the 12 and 6 numerals. It has, if this thing will just focus. Okay, it has made in USSR at the 6 o'clock position. And we also have these second counters at the end of the dial. It has a nice curve to it. I hope that you can see it. It was originally white, of course. They were all white. They did not come in this cream variant. This cream is actually the patina, which was made over years of use. And of course you can see the patina on the hands and on the batons as well. It's one of the most beautiful patinas I have ever seen on a watch. And upon inspecting the market and the internet for these models, this is amongst the best conditions I have ever seen. It's original, as I have said in the beginning. It was not altered in any way. It's nearly 50 years, and look at this condition of the case. Of course it has a couple of scratches on it, but the thing which interested me the most was the fact that it had no corrosion whatsoever, because these cases, they are not made of stainless steel like modern cases. Let me just leave it running so you can see. They are not made of stainless steel like modern cases. They are made of brass, and they are chromium plated. So if you wear them and you sweat, they will corrode. And if one of these cases corrodes, I don't know, it's sort of the end of the road for the case. I don't know of any repair process which is able to repair the case, of any cheap repair process, apart from replacing the case, of course. But I like to keep it original as it is. I love the originality of this piece, and I'll try and keep it as original as I can for as long as I can. Okay, as I said, the case is chrome plated. It's made of brass. Its width is 36 millimeters, without these pushes, of course. It has a thickness of 12 millimeters. It's quite thin. It's beautiful to wear under a shirt cuff. And the total weight of this piece is 44 grams. I have actually weighed it. The case back, it's made of stainless steel. It has nothing. It was nothing originally written on these case backs. If you will look carefully, you will see that something is. Maybe you'll see it's scratched on the case back. It's an interesting story to this. So upon looking at the stainless steel case back, you might be able to just make out that it has INV written on it, and an indistinguishable number, at least an indistinguishable number for me. It's something like 41, I don't know. But the reason that this has it is because, well, this watch, of course, did not originally belong to me. It originally belonged to my girlfriend's grandfather. He was an administrative director during the communist era in one of the societies of construction of Bucharest. Basically, they received a couple of these watches here for timing purposes of the workers. He, I guess, liked the watch, and because he was a director, he just kind of took it. He took it. He didn't use it all that much during his work, and it basically sat in a drawer for maybe like 40 years. When I got it, he wanted to throw it away because it was in a rough working condition. It only needed an oiling and a basic service, of course. But after this oil and the basic service, it runs beautifully and perfectly. I did not do anything else to the watch. I do not want to polish the acrylic crystal. I definitely do not want to polish the case because it's not made of stainless steel, but I just love the way that this acrylic crystal looks. It has a certain yellowing to it and a couple of fine scratches. Nothing too serious, but isn't it wonderful that in 50 years this watch managed to stay in this beautiful shape? I think it's absolutely beautiful. These gold-plated hands with this patina on them, it's just a joy to sit and watch the chronograph running. Of course, I'm not going to time any workers with it. I'm not going to run with it and try and time laps on the circuit. Not that I have a sports car or anything like that, but yeah, I actually drive a diesel. That's quite sad. Okay. The strap is not original, of course. This was purchased as an aftermarket strap. I don't know what kind of straps these watches came with. They were probably all gone, corroded, and eaten by mold or something like that. They definitely do need aftermarket straps. This is, I think, an Italian-made leather strap. It's quite thin, and I think it gives the watch a very nice look to it. This regarding the movement on this watch, it's the Poljot caliber 3017. As I said, it's a column wheel chronograph with 18,000 beats per hour. It's not the smoothest running chronograph, of course. 18,000 beats per hour will not produce a completely smooth second hand. But yeah, you don't really expect a spring drive movement, don't you? It was in production for about 20 years, until 1979, when Poljot changed the movement to the caliber 3133, which was also a copy of the Valejou chronograph movement 7734, I think. That was a cantilever movement with 21,600, I think, beats per hour, and it was considered superior. It was found in later model Poljots or Sturmanskie chronograph watches. This is this is the more collectible one. Why? Because it was the one which was in space. It was the first, and it's very, very reliable. The problem with these movements is, of course, spare parts. They're quite hard to come by. Of course, Poljot does not produce balance wheels or cogs for these watches, so you need to find an experienced watchmaker which has spare parts from new old stock watches or new old stock parts. Yeah, servicing will probably be a bit of a pain. The central hand, which operates the chronograph, is anodized blue and is pretty much corrosion free. The minute counter has this gold-plated hand as well, but that did not escape corrosion as the rest of the watch. yeah, I think it's forgiven, and it definitely gives it character. Also, this acrylic crystal has a slight yellow tint to it. I think it contributes to the creaminess of the dial, if I may say so myself. Also, something which I want you guys to hear is the way that this watch sounds. I mean, all mechanical watches tick, of course, but this tick is really loud. I mean, I can hear it from the other end of the room, and it's one of the more beautiful clicks that I have ever heard. I'm actually going to put this watch near the mic portion of the phone. And while I put it near the mic portion of the phone, I'll give you something interesting to look at. For example, this beautiful Mont Blanc pen, handmade in Switzerland, of course. Just joking, guys. Listen to the movement. It's beautiful. Yeah, that was it. So, great movement. Wonderful movement. This is me doing a wrist shot of the Poljot. Let's just watch the minute dial, how it changes when the second passes the 12 o'clock. Oh my god, that was beautiful. It almost gave me a watchgasm. Yeah, that's a term. Okay. So, you may be wondering, Dragos, are you going to wear this watch on a daily basis? Are you going to use it and abuse it, as they say? Is it your beater watch? No, of course it's not. It's beautiful, and it's delicate, and it's so important. It's quite expensive as well. Of course, I got it for free because someone wanted to throw it away. But even though I got it for free, I'm actually never going to sell it. I actually have a fantasy where I show this to my grandkids. Okay, let's be honest. I actually have a fantasy to show it to my friends or you guys on YouTube. No, I don't plan to sell it, even though they go for like 500 to 1,000 euros, depending on the condition. One which is in this condition will easily hit 1,000 euros, I think. Yeah, it's definitely worth it. It's cheaper than a vintage Speedmaster, and it's not much less interesting than the Speedmaster. When you look at this dial, yeah, see the seconds dial? It has those concentric ridges, and the minute dial for the chronograph counter, also those ridges. Yeah, and that hand is not perfect. This is the way that they were built. I mean, if you look at the second counter, the printing for the seconds, it's not perfectly put in the center of the circle, but yeah, that doesn't mean it's fake, of course. It's just the way that they were built. It kind of adds character to the watch. I love it just the way. So yes, not a perfect watch, of course. Just a watch which was built for purpose. And boy, did it perform. Did it perform for, yeah, the majority of its lifetime and in its history. Okay, so in this conclusion, what can I say? This has been my most interesting piece, which I wanted to show you guys so far. It's my most interesting piece, in my opinion. And I'm really glad to be able to do these videos and be able to show the world what I love and spread the information and things which in which I find passion. Please let me know in the comment section below what you think. Let me know if I sucked in this review. Let me know if you think this watch sucks. Let me know if you think if I don't have an Amiga Speedmaster Man on the Moon, I suck. I probably do, who knows. Yeah, I would love to have an Amiga Speedmaster, actually. Of course I would. Who wouldn't? It's a really nice watch. Okay. So yeah, thanks for watching. Like this video, subscribe to my channel if you want to see other watches, and thanks for being with me this whole time, guys. Okay, see you in the next one. Bye bye.